Between last March and the first week of this April, and in complete secrecy, at least 6 cargo planes, each with a capacity of 100 tons, departed from the Chennai Air Cargo Terminal at Chennai Airport in Tamil Nadu, southern India, heading to various locations across the United States, such as Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, and others. 026. So, what exactly were these 6 cargo planes transporting from India to the US? And how did we come to know about this? Well, they were carrying iPhones, 600 tons of iPhones in various models. This was revealed in a report by Reuters. Apple, the American tech giant, strategically chartered these cargo flights to ship iPhones from its factories in India to the US market. 057. It was a swift move to bypass Trump's tariffs and to boost its stock of the popular smartphones in America. The primary reason behind this maneuver was to circumvent Trump's tariffs, which were imposed on 180 countries, including a 26% duty on Indian imports at the beginning of April. However, Trump later suspended the tariffs for 3 months, aiming to negotiate more favorable trade deals with each country individually, excluding China, of course, with whom the US 130 is engaged in a trade war. As explained in our previous episode, you should definitely check it out. Apple managed to import the largest volume of India-made iPhones into the US before Trump's tariffs officially took effect. Interestingly, Apple didn't do the same with China, even though 90% of iPhones are assembled there. This is due to the massive reciprocal tariffs over 125% imposed between the world's 2 largest economies. 159. Eventually, Trump backed down slightly and exempted smartphones from these hefty tariffs. Apple had been quietly planning this massive, secret shipment of iPhones for months, knowing full well Trump's erratic approach toward implementing sweeping tariffs. So, they increased production by 20% in their Indian iPhone factories operated by Apple's to major suppliers, the Taiwanese giant Foxconn and India's Tata Electronics. 230. Foxconn's largest plant in Chennai even had to ramp up its workforce and extend shifts to the point that employees were working on Sundays, an official holiday in India, to meet the American company's growing demand. One of Apple's key arrangements to accelerate shipments was pressuring Indian airport authorities to reduce customs clearance time at Chennai Airport from 30 hours to just 6. To 59. In response, the government of Prime Minister Narendra Modi instructed officials to provide Apple with full support in facilitating the process. The iPhone 14 with its charging cable weighs about 350 grams, which means that the 600 tons transported by the 6 planes equated to approximately 1.5 million iPhones after accounting for the packaging weight at a total cost of around $2 billion. 327. Apple's covert plan to boost its production in India and ship hundreds of tons of its renowned phones to America raises several pressing questions that need to be addressed together. Why doesn't Apple manufacture its products in America as Trump dreams it would? Why is such a dream almost impossible? And why is moving the manufacturing of iPhones in particular to the United States a highly complex and challenging task? What are the supply chains for the world's best-selling phone? And the most crucial question, why does China control 90% of the assembly of all iPhone devices in the world? For 03, these are very important questions, and we'll try to find the answers together today, so stay tuned for the end times in California between then President Barack Obama, 513, and some of Silicon Valley's most prominent leaders, including Steve Jobs, CEO of Apple, Eric Schmidt, CEO of Google, and Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook. Each guest was expected to pose a question to President Obama. When it was Steve Jobs' turn, Obama approached him and asked Steve, what would it take to manufacture iPhones in the United States? Jobs explained why Apple produces iPhones in other countries such as China, then responded to Obama directly and resolutely, those jobs will not come back to the United States. 553. The dream of shifting iPhone production from China to the United States has captivated successive administrations since the iPhone S debut from Obama through Trump. But Trump in particular is obsessed with reshoring manufacturing to the US, and the iPhone has become the emblem of that vision. He believed that imposing hefty tariffs would incentivize manufacturers to return production to America, thereby creating jobs and bolstering the economy. Indeed, assigning Apple to manufacture its flagship product, 630, the iPhone, stateside was integral to Trump's second-term agenda, something he and his administration considered achievable. In reality, however, only they seemed to think so. Market analysts and Apple itself have maintained that it was practically impossible. On April 6th of this year, Howard Lutnick, Trump's Commerce Secretary, spoke about how Apple and other tech firms could rely on American manufacturing expertise to build their products. 7:13 2 days later, on April 8th, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt made the remarks you're about to see. The very next day, April 9th, Trump reiterated the point on Truth Social, calling it the perfect time for business leaders to relocate their companies to the United States, just as Apple and many others are doing. 7:56 at that moment, Apple's CEO Tim Cook must have sighed in relief, because he knew beyond doubt that moving iPhone assembly to the US is virtually impossible. Even the $500 billion investment Trump touted contained no mention of U.S. iPhone production. But before I explain exactly why shifting iPhone manufacturing from China to America is so infeasible, as Steve Jobs, Tim Cook, and countless experts have insisted, let me quickly outline how the iPhone supply chain actually works. Look, Apple sells more than 220 million iPhones worldwide each year, 840 offering 7 different models in a variety of colors and configurations. That immense scale makes production extraordinarily complex, and that's where China comes in. It's the only country capable of executing the massive assembly operations that generate gold for Apple. And just so you understand the stakes, the iPhone is Apple's primary revenue source, accounting for over half of the company's sales. 908, the iPhone alone represents 55.6% of the world's most valuable company's annual revenue. Another 21.2% comes from its various services, 9.5% from wearables and accessories such as watches and headphones, 7.2% from Mac computers, and 6.5% from iPads. Of the roughly 220 million iPhones Apple sells each year, about 200 million are assembled in China, primarily by the Taiwanese giants Foxconn and Pegatron. 950, that final assembly step is just the culmination of a vast Apple supply chain, most of whose suppliers are based in Asia. Have you ever wondered how many components go into the iPhone you're holding? According to market research firm Tech Insights, there are 387 distinct, visible parts in the final assembly of the iPhone 16, 1018. These include chips and printed circuit boards, batteries, wiring harnesses, lenses, displays, and metal and plastic casings. Tech Insights arrives at this count by physically tearing down each device. If you expand the scope to every tiny element down to the microscopic die components within chips, every screw 11 o'clock focusing back on the 387 visible components, they're sourced from a roster of 187 different Apple suppliers. Of those, 169 maintain manufacturing operations in China and Taiwan. Every one of those suppliers ships its parts to Foxconn's or Pegatron's Chinese plants, where final assembly takes place. Rather than enumerate the hundreds of suppliers and their hundreds of components, let's zoom in on the final assembly stage. 1202, Foxconn's flagship FATP final assembly, test, and packaging complex sits in Zhengzhou, China, and it's enormous. It resembles an entire city, housing hundreds of thousands of workers, complete with schools, gyms, medical facilities, and dormitories. Locals even call it iPhone City. In short, the iPhone supply chain in China is a marvel of modern manufacturing, an intricate web of massive facilities and interdependent factories, producing tens of components for hundreds of companies across Asia and employing millions of people around the clock. 1248 Matthew Moore, a former manufacturing engineer at Apple, puts it bluntly: what city in America is willing to drop everything and dedicate itself entirely to building iPhones? In China, millions of people are involved in Apple's supply chains. 1315, the iPhone's supply chain in China isn't just about having sophisticated manufacturing facilities. The real challenge for the United States or any other country trying to replace China is manpower, the sheer number of skilled, educated workers that simply can't be found in such abundance anywhere else on Earth. 1337, Steve Jobs and Tim Cook have addressed this issue multiple times. For example, during discussions with President Barack Obama about moving iPhone production to the U.S., Jobs candidly admitted that the country lacked the large pool of highly trained employees his company needed. 14 years ago, before Apple had reached its current monumental scale, Jobs noted that the company already had 700,000 factory workers in China, supported by 30,000 on-site engineers. 1415, finding that kind of workforce in the U.S. would be impossible. Tim Cook was equally straightforward during Trump's first term. In 2017, Cook explained that Apple relied on countries like China not because of low labor costs. China hasn't been a low-cost labor country for years, but because of the quality of its workforce, the abundance of skilled workers, and the sheer scale of talent, all concentrated in a single nation. He offered a vivid example. In China, you could fill multiple football stadiums. 1451, with advanced tooling engineers. In the U.S., even arranging a meeting of such engineers might not fill a single room. In other words, the biggest obstacle facing Trump and his administration isn't just China's dominance in manufacturing. It's the fact that China is home to millions of highly trained individuals capable of running the machinery and applying the skills necessary to build iPhones, which still require a significant amount of manual labor. 1534, Matthew Moore also highlights another issue: the engineering support needed to run a single factory simply doesn't exist in the U.S. There aren't enough students pursuing STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics degrees. This backdrop explains the viral AI-generated video that circulated a couple of weeks ago, humorously showing exhausted Americans attempting to manufacture smartphones. 1555, while the video is satirical, it underscores the very real challenges the U.S. would face in producing iPhones domestically, contrary to the vision laid out by Trump and his administration. Wedbush Securities, a wealth management and financial services firm, sent a note to investors warning that moving all iPhone production to the U.S. would be prohibitively expensive for both Apple and its customers. 1628, according to their estimates, shifting even just 10% of the iPhone supply chain from China to the U.S. would take 3 years, cost $30 billion, and cause major disruptions. Even if this were accomplished, the price of iPhones made in America would more than triple. So unless American consumers are willing to pay $3,500 for an iPhone, domestic production would remain unfeasible. 1706, in summary, Trump's dream of relocating iPhone manufacturing from China to the U.S. is nothing more than an unattainable mirage, a sunset dream that cannot be realized. Let me leave you with a question. We often hear that there are over 1,000 components involved in manufacturing an iPhone, sourced from various companies primarily based in Asia. 1731, so why aren't there any Apple manufacturing facilities in our Arab countries that produce parts used in the iPhone supply chain? Is it because we don't have skilled workers capable of handling such tasks, or is there another reason? If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like and share button, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. 1756, and be sure to tell your friends and family about us. They might find it useful. Bye.